Hello and welcome to this episode of T-Tech. On today's episode, we're going to discuss the basics of web hosting. I do hope you enjoy it, and let's get into it. Hello and welcome to this episode of T-Tech. On today's episode, we're going to go over the basics of web hosting. So, right off the bat, there's four main components of it. You have the domain name, DNS, the server, and the website. So, what we need to do, we're going to start here with the domain name. So the domain name is that name, like google.com, slashdot.com, any domain name that makes it easy to get to a website, because it maps to the IP address. Now though, to actually have control over a domain name, you need to use something called a registrar. And the process goes like this. So first of all, we have you up here. And with the registrar, you select the domain name. So you go on the registrar site, make sure the domain name is available, or buy it. You can also sell them. But you give the registrar payment for that. And the registrar talks to ICANN, which manages domain names and IP addresses and things like that. And they make a record, the registration record, that maps the domain name you bought from the registrar to you. And then this record has a registration date when you bought it and an expiration date. And I believe you can have these up to 10 years at a time before you have to buy it again and renew it. But basically the idea is you pay the registrar, and the registrar acts on your behalf to get with ICANN and tells them they send your information to them and they map that with you. Okay? So that's how we actually, the paperwork basically of getting a domain name. The next part that's important is the DNS, the domain name system. Now, this manages domain names that we just got the control over to the IP addresses of them. Now, we're talking about hosting, so we're going to get really into the hosting of it a little bit. We have fully managed DNS and self-hosted DNS. So the thing is, most registrars like Namecheap.com, Name.com, I'm trying to think of a few other ones. There's lots of them. They have a web interface to control what records are associated with your domain name. So what IP addresses. You have an A record here that can be associated with an IPv4 address. You have the quad A record for IPv6, MX for mail, a C name, which is an alias, or also known as canonical name, so like mail dot and then your website domain name, or info dot, okay? And a very important one, a text record. This is information for your domain name. This is things like SPF records, that's Sender Policy Framework. Those are for email. So those help you basically authenticate that email your domain sending came from it and is supposed to come from it. And for what we're talking about, that's just, we're not doing email, but this all fits in it. So those are some of the fully managed. The advantage is you're just putting it on the interface, okay? You don't have to manage the hardware and the, all the details of that. They do it. It's in the cloud, in other words. With self-hosted DNS, you actually need a few more records, which we'll touch on those right now. You need a name server record. This tells other name servers which name server will manage the domain. And you need a start of authority record. So this is telling it, I'm the domain name server that is in charge of this domain. Alright? So it's very important to protect the DNS server settings, because if any of this stuff gets changed, it will propagate out and someone could spoof your DNS information. But one last thing about self-hosted DNS. With self-hosted, you have to take care of the physical hardware, everything about that computer you're running it on, okay? You have to take care of the internet connection, and you have to take care of the power, all right? All of that stuff falls on you. So that is a disadvantage as well, because with fully managed, they're taking care of all the physical stuff. Alright? You just have to know what to do to put the records in. Now, likewise with hosting options, you have the fully managed and you have self-hosted, and this is for the server. Now, we're talking about the server hardware as well. So you have fully managed. In this case, it will most likely be in the cloud as a virtual machine, and that usually, well, almost always, obviously, is in a data center. So these are things like Liquid Web, what other ones? Domain.com, DigitalOcean. There's plenty of them to choose from. But the main advantage, again, fully managed server. They're taking care of the hardware that's running that VM, all the physical details of it. And with the data center, they're in charge of having redundant power, redundant internet connections, redundant data backups with fully managed. Now, usually it's an option you turn on, but they are doing a lot more for you in that case. Now, with self-hosted, you have either a physical or a virtual machine, like a VMware ESXi or Proxmox or something like that, and you would install that. But the main difference is it would be located in your home or office. And again, that's all that responsibility is going on your shoulders here. So, what that means is you're responsible for the internet, you're responsible for the power, you are responsible at 3 a.m. when that hard drive fails, and you got to get the site back up, especially if it's for a business. It's going also into business now. But believe me, there's a lot more responsibility with self-hosted than you think. You got to think about this too. When your ISP in your home or office doesn't upgrade, you can't get on the internet from your home or office, but everybody else cannot access your server anyway, because the internet isn't functioning. So that's another thing to think about. As well as price for those business services. The price is a lot more most times. Then the last thing. This one's easy. Easier website. This is actually the contents of what will be displayed. In our case, we're just talking about a basic website, and we would have files on there like your HTML files, your CSS, and your JavaScript, and that's the main components of that part of it. So, with all that, in the next part, we're going to do a demo of how to put in the records on Namecheap.com, in my case, and then we're going to go all the way over to DigitalOcean, and we're going to spin up a VM in the cloud, and we want to map that VM's IP address with our record in Namecheap. Alright? So with that, I'll be back in just a second. Okay, welcome back. So we're on DigitalOcean right now, and this is the fully managed server provider, and this is the cloud. So what we want to do is we logged in and we clicked under Manage and we clicked Droplets. Droplets are just their term for a virtual machine. Lots of providers have different names for them. But what we want to do, and before I do this, up there where it says usage, 78 cents. The thing with these cloud services, when you're using them, it's just like any utility. You pay for what you use, and at the end of your cycle, you pay that amount. So what you have to understand is with DigitalOcean, if you create it but you're not using it, with a virtual machine, they still have to reserve all that information on their servers for you. So that means they can't reclaim those resources for any other customers. So as long as the droplet is actually still on, created rather, not on, it will still charge you. So just so you know about that. So here we're going to create droplet. Just want to click on that and let it load up. And in this case, while we go through this, I'll kind of draw parallels with physical. So Ubuntu, this would be like we went out there, we got the ISO, put it on a USB. Okay, we're getting ready to install it. Okay, and the down here, which in this case we can use FreeBSD, Fedora, Debian, CentOS, whatever you want. We're going to use Ubuntu, and if you go here, you can also choose the version you want. Same thing with the other ones. And there is other options, but these are the main things we want to talk about. So that is like making your install media. It's just in a nice interface to make it easy. Down here, this is equivalent to going out to newegg.com or other conference sites like that, or Dell or something, and getting a contract with them and getting the hardware, or just buying it outright and building it. That is what this is for. And then this is where you got to watch the prices, because even though this is $160 a month, it's 23 cents, 238 an hour. So if you're running that and you have it on for a month, that's what you're paying. So be careful. Don't oversubscribe yourself. We're going to use the standard one. They have other options for their hardware, but this is like you building the hardware. It's just done on a VM instead. This is the resources of the hypervisor that's allowing it to happen. I'm going to choose this one here, $5 a month. And this is my hardware. I have 1 gig of RAM, 1 CPU, 25 gigs of a solid state hard drive, and I have 1 terabyte of bandwidth on the internet connection going into the droplet. Rather, with this, the inbound is free, the outbound costs money. You have up to 1,000, then you have overages. Okay? So that is selecting our hardware. And once you go down here, as I said, you can enable backups for them to take care of it so you don't forget, but obviously this adds to the price. You can add more physical hard drives. This is just like buying a hard drive. Alright, and this here is your data center options. So you can see, you can put this thing anywhere in the world you want. It's really amazing. And you're just renting it, So, we're going to choose, in this example, San Francisco Data Center 2, Region 2. And then this is all of your networking options. So these would be, this is what you would have to access it, and then other things. You can enable IPv6. There's monitoring, private networking between the droplets. So down here, for authentication, you can use SSH keys to log in over SSH or a one-time root password. Again, if you do that, be careful of managing the email you get, because it does have the password. You want to log in and change that. We'll just choose one-time password at this point. This is just for demo purposes. This is the host name. You can change it after you're in there or just here. This is the cool thing, but this is where you got to be careful too. I could spin up. This is 4 servers. That's the amazing thing about the cloud. But you got to realize, that is, you have to take 5 and multiply it by 4 every month. Okay, so that is more money involved. So we're just going to do 1. You can add tags to organize it and things, and you can have projects on here. But what we want to do after that is just click Create Droplet. And it's running up. And it is spinning up the VM on a server in San Francisco right now. And I am sitting quite a ways away from there right now, and it is just amazing, isn't it? So it does take a little bit of time, but just straightforward. Once it gets all the way progress is done, you're good to go. We're almost done here. And alright, so here's the thing. That IP address is the IPv4 address that it is publicly accessible on. That is on an interface in the VM right now. So let's actually do this. If I open up a terminal and I ping, and bring this down a little bit. If I ping that IP, 134, 209, 57, 219. We get replies because it is live on the internet. So there you go. Now, this brings up one point real quick, and then we'll wrap this section up. The VM is directly on the internet. It's not in a DMZ behind another firewall or anything like that. In a home or office, I would use something like OpenBSD, Smoothwall, or pfSense or something like that, and have a separate subnet just for my servers that can't talk to the LAN. And I've talked about that before. But yeah, this is something to think about because it is directly open to every attack out there. Anything can happen to it at the moment. So, basically though, that's what's going on. This is our server, and we have a lot of interesting things. And in this case, you can actually click console. So let's click console. We don't have the password yet, but this is just giving you the idea. And there we go. This is a VNC session from their website back into my VM. So it's actually the same thing as having a keyboard and monitor hooked up. So there you go with this section. And in the next section, we're going to go ahead and then go over to Namecheap and create our A record for that IP address. So I'll see you there. Alright, welcome back. So now we're on the Namecheap.com. So this is my registrar I chose to purchase tkmonroe.com from. So, what we want to do is I went to domain list and I went under advanced DNS. And what we're doing is going here under host records. And what we want to do actually is go ahead and just delete these first two. And what this is doing is it's actually deleting them out of the zone file on the DNS server. Alright, actually you can't delete those. I apologize. What we're actually going to do is add a new record. And these are the records, some of them that we were discussing. I want to add an A record. This is for an IPv4 address. And you want the host to be at. That means the domain name, the current. It's starting at that domain name. So anything under that domain name. And what we're going to do is paste our droplet, our VM's IP address. Leave this set to automatic. Save your changes. And now you have an A record that points to that server. And you can also add a CNAME record, so in other words, the www dot and then your domain name would work, but it has to start with host, www, because it's a subdomain basically of that domain. Now the other thing we're going to talk about is if you want to have email service real quick. And what you would do if you want that is click here, and they have email services as well. But if you're hosting your own or you want to put email on this machine, you would go ahead here and make an MX record. And again, we would say at because it's beginning with this domain. And we would say paste this in. The priority, which is for what mail server to handle the mail for your domain. Ideally, you should have multiple with different priorities. But once that goes through, now that is the MX record for that. And it doesn't take care of spoofing, but we'll quick just add it. Getting a little bit off topic, but we'll what you would do to basically take care of the spoofing part is just add a text record. Okay, and that text record is basically like parameters to the requesting mail server of what to expect and do. So that is mapping the A record. This takes a little bit of time to propagate to other name servers because right now, Namecheap's name servers are the start of authority for tkmonroe.com. Okay, so and if you wanted to use your own, you would have to go back under domain in this case at least. And instead of Namecheap basic DNS, you would actually do custom DNS, and that's where that would be self-hosted DNS instead of fully managed DNS. Okay, so the last thing we're actually going to do, I went ahead and installed Apache on that VM we made, and we're going to try to go to it in 1 second. Okay, we're back. So we're still in Namecheap, and I just wanted to show you real quick. This is what you have to put in. You have to put in an A record. The host is the @ sign, and then the IP address of your VM, whether it's a physical or virtual server, okay? Cloud or on-premise, put the IP in. The time to live is how long this entry is valid. And every time, DNS servers expect new information about the domain, otherwise it will time out, and you won't be able to resolve the domain name. Okay, so, and then the CNAME does it, so we can put www dot in there. What you want to do to check this, if you're making changes, like if the IP changed or you want to have two servers and do load balancing between them, and you want to check that it's working correctly, you go here to the G Suite toolbox. It has a dig in it. This way, you don't have to be on Linux or BSD or something to use dig. It's all right here in a web application. So just type Google space dig, and that will get you to this website. And I just put in my domain name, and if we hit enter, it looks it up for us. And as you can see, in this case, Namecheap and or a closer DNS server to this server that's in the background resolved the IP address we put in there. This is why it's important to protect that dashboard. If someone got in there, they can completely change everything about where the domain goes. Now, we didn't have a quad A record or anything, and these are just if you're dealing with email, you would do MX, and then you would have to change things around, okay? But this helps you check everything. So what we're going to do to finish up is go and type, and again, I actually already installed Apache, okay? So we want to go to tkmonroe.com, and there's our default Apache 2 website. So at this point, all you'd have to do is go in and start editing your files, maybe configure WordPress on your server or anything else. But I hope this was enjoyable. I hope it was helpful, and thank you for viewing. And as always, this is Tyler with TTech. Have a very nice day.